to focus on the high level of corruption, cronyism, nepotism in the government, and of course the whole issue of conflict of interest that has been dominating this government.
Yes.
Your thoughts? You said it's a quite eventful week.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
I think what we're seeing with the government's action and inaction is a classic case study as to why governments fail. And everything that you're seeing unfolding goes against what is actually desirable to move an economy forward. Beginning with the political rights of the citizens of this country. And once we can't get past that pillar, nothing else can actually flourish. And that is why we're seeing exactly what has been unfolding within our political economy over the last several years. And it's disastrous, and it's taken us to a place where it will be difficult for us to recover. And I've continuously been saying that we're slipping in terms of losing a generation, and it's going to affect our outward migration. It's going to affect our inward migration, and those who don't have options will find it very difficult to make a livelihood because of the conditions that are being that we're experiencing under this administration.
Thanks, you. Like I said, so many things to talk about, but I want to start first and foremost with that cabinet reshuffle, as I want to call it. By the way, 4 new MPs have been sworn in, and the naked nepotism and cronyism in this government, or the cronyism and nepotism has been unmasked in such a naked way a few days ago when the government announced that indeed the Minister of State, for example, has resigned as a minister and as a member of parliament, and almost immediately we've seen an appointment of him as Director General of the Ministry of the Presidency. In retrospect, the minister has not resigned. It's simply a change of his title from Minister of State, and that's a way of keeping him in government. So what happens? You appoint somebody else, right? It's a new appointment almost, and then you created a job for him. So he's going to get a super salary to sit there as the Director General, and then you appoint a minister as Minister of State. Minister Don Hastings. And by the way, when you look at Minister Don Hastings being moved from Minister of Public Affairs, a ministry that was created by this government just to give her a job. That is what happened there. They created the Ministry of Public Affairs to give her a job. She did absolutely nothing, because I can't recall, and I guess none of us can really recall what Minister Don Hastings did as Minister of Public Affairs. And all of a sudden, the minister has been appointed as now the Minister of State, and you have a Director General in the ministry. And before I bring you in, I want to focus a little bit on these changes and what exactly they meant. So, minister within the Ministry of Natural Resources, Simona Brooms, was moved, and she's now the minister in the Ministry of the Presidency with responsibility for youth affairs. And let me talk a little bit about this youth affairs and this whole youth issue. So we have a Minister of Social Cohesion, as in Minister Dr. Norton, who has responsibility for youth.
Yes.
Then we have a Director of Youth.
Yes.
I think Ms. Carmichael, if I'm correct with the name there. Then we have an advisor on youth affairs
Yes.
in Aubrey Norton. Now we have a minister within the Ministry of the Presidency with responsibility for youth affairs. And young people can't get jobs. Young people can't get training opportunities. Young people can't get so many things, facilities to recreational facilities, and a whole host of things. But you have 4 persons with super salaries actually manning a sector that nothing is really happening in.
And this is a classic case of obesity in government. The government is bloated, and it really feeds into the philosophy of the PNC. They believe in big government because most of their loyalists sit around and wait for jobs when they're in government. So they might have not have been very active and meaningful when they were in opposition. So they hang around and they wait for government to get work. The problem is that when you give these officers titles, they really can't perform because they've not been involved in any meaningful way outside of government in the sense of gaining any amount of experience. But you have to reward them because they've been there hanging around waiting for employment. And it is not surprising that what we're seeing unfolding here with this coalition government, if I can use the word coalition government because it's so heavily dominated by the PNC, is exactly how they operate. And young people of today, they need to understand that the appointments mean nothing in terms of creating an environment where they can find opportunities. The opportunities that are being created are solely for their friends, family, loyalists. And it is exactly why we're in this position as an economy. So if you look at most of what we're seeing, it is not surprising that we're in this position because we have a lot of people in positions not required to do anything but to be rewarded for their loyalty to the party while in opposition.
And I want to continue, Hugh, to touch on a few more ministers, and just to highlight the changes. So, Minister Valerie Patterson-Yearwood has there's a whole host of issues at the Ministry of Housing with her, where contracts were being awarded to her husband while she has oversight of the Central Housing and Planning Authority. She has now been moved from that ministry, and she's been placed in the ministry, the very, very inactive Ministry of Agriculture. And she is the minister within the Ministry of Agriculture with responsibility for rural affairs. And I see a lot of people making a lot of fun out of this thing on Facebook to ask if she's responsible for rural affairs, then it means that Minister Holder, who, by the way, has not been doing anything. He hasn't done anything for the agriculture sector over the past 4 years. Is now, he has responsibility for the urban agriculture in the urban areas. So a lot of people are saying, we're checking around Georgetown and so on to see where we can see they're planting rice and sugar and so forth. But the bottom line is
urban agriculture?
Yes, he's probably the Minister of Urban Agriculture. She is for rural agriculture.
Maybe.
And she said, in an interview recently that, I think yesterday, that, I'm not responsible for rice and sugar and so on. I'm dealing with urban agriculture. So a lot of people think that rice and sugar and so on, they can find it by the Harbour Bridge. I see one person said probably they're planting some rice by the Harbour Bridge and so forth. The point I'm making is that the minister has been moved from a ministry. So you transfer the problem in the first instance. That's the first thing. Then the second thing you did is to create a position for her. She's responsible for urban agriculture. The ministry has been absolutely inactive. Nothing has been done by that ministry. We've seen the paddy bug destroying the rice crops. We've seen cash crop farmers not getting any help. And I spoke last week about nothing. We're hearing about aquaculture. We're hearing about livestock. We're not hearing anything about those. We're not hearing anything about any move to create mega farms to get investors to come in. And I know there were some plans before under the PPP where persons wanted to come in and set up mega farms. We're not hearing anything. Well, we know what they did to the sugar industry. Put thousands of people out of jobs, and they borrowed $30 billion, and nobody knows where the money. Matter of fact, Minister Holder said he never saw the money. He didn't know anything about the money. So this is the thing that is happening in the government.
Yes, and Ed, we should be moving towards smart agriculture. We've I think we've borrowed $100 million to move in that direction. But I think the fundamental issue here is that the government is deficient when it comes to talent and depth. And that is why you'll find that the pieces will be moved around. I wouldn't call it a reshuffling, because a reshuffling means that you want to create more efficiency by putting the most suitable persons in the best positions where they can perform. You will not get that out of this moving of parts. And that is because the government is starved for talent and depth. And it goes back to leadership. So the president has the power and the authority to go outside of that little circle that he has. But you cannot do that, because that is against the model that they have adopted and hold fast to. So you'll continue to have inefficiencies because you don't have people with talent and the party doesn't have depth. And it's sad because we know that we're coming, or we're in an age in the global political economy where knowledge creation and knowledge is fundamental to moving the economy forward. And if you look at each minister and each senior government functionary, and then you combine it and you look at the collective whole, you will see why we're not going to progress, because we lack talent in the government, unlike what exists within the opposition. We are focused on talent. We are focused on ensuring that we have the best and the brightest to be placed in positions where we can actually advance the economy. And that is why we're in a state of paralysis, because behind an institution, you will have to have capable people to move those institutions. If you don't have that, you'll continue to have the same outcomes persistently as what exists currently in Guyana.
And I just want to go through this, Hugh, and I want the folks at home to listen, because I want to move off from this thing and move to some other issues. And the first one, so I'm going to go through this with you. And I highlighted some ministers. We have one, Minister Brooms, big salary. What is she doing? What has she been doing? Now she's responsible for youth affairs. What is she going to be doing for young people, when we have so many people responsible for that sector, and young people, this government has failed young people completely. Then we go on to Minister... go ahead.
Can we take them one by one? Or I'll take them...
Yeah, because I want to go through all of them so that we can
just
together, right?
Put it in perspective.
We have Minister Norton. He hasn't done anything for young people. Absolutely nothing. Minister Valerie Patterson, big salary. She's not going to be doing anything in the Ministry of Agriculture, because the government is now focused completely on oil. Oil is the answer to their prayers. Nothing else is important. We had Minister Dr. Rup Narayan, and now we put Miss Sabaru Haley, if I get the name correct, is now the Minister of Public Service. Nothing is being done for public servants. Public servants are still on as the trade unionists put it, starvation wages or poverty wages. We have Minister Holder. Hasn't done anything. He's clueless. I'm going to be honest with you. The minister knows nothing about agriculture and the sector. You ask him anything, he knows nothing. We have Minister Sharma. What Minister Sharma has been doing, apart from expending hundreds of millions of dollars on a few audits, claiming that it's going to expose all the corruption under the PPP, and nothing came out of that. We have Minister Garida Lowe. A lot of people don't know that that minister exists, because she does nothing. She sits in a ministry, she does nothing. The Prime Minister does nothing as well, apart from driving around, cut ribbons, and shake hands, and so forth. Absolutely nothing. And the opposition leader always put it, as the Prime Minister, his portfolio is equivalent now to the information liaison to the President. Absolutely nothing of significance he's doing as the Prime Minister. We have Minister Dawn Hastings, like I mentioned before. She did nothing, and she will not do anything because Harman will still be running the show. That's the bottom line. You know, he's the Director General. Keith Scott, Minister Keith Scott. What Minister Keith Scott has been doing? Minister Ramjutan says he don't know anything. He don't have answer to anything, to the problems at the prison, the overcrowding at the prison, the crime situation. Nothing, absolutely nothing. Minister Patterson has his own set of issues that he has to deal with the Demerara Harbour Bridge feasibility study, the issues at the airport, the 4-lane highway, the Sheriff Street, the Mandela Avenue project. Minister Cummings in the Ministry of Health, she's doing absolutely nothing. Minister Alicock hardly does anything. Not a single Amerindian land has been titled for 4 years. He said it himself. Minister Ferguson, who is now the minister responsible for housing, she's doing nothing. So I'm going to go through. I highlighted here about 10 or 12 ministers. And if we say $1 million a month, we're spending $10 to $12 million a month on these people who are doing absolutely nothing. And that's the point I'm making.
And you're on point. And if I can add to that, I think what the nation is being starved of is a roadmap and a justification. What the president has to do is to give the nation a progress report. So he needs to say to the nation,
that will be an interesting report.
This is where we were, this is where we're at, and this is where we want to be before the term ends. So when you do a movement, or I don't want to use the word reshuffle because it's really not a reshuffle. When you replace persons and you create more space for your elites within government, you have to basically justify to the people of this nation why you're doing it. And the quick answer to that is that you have to show or convince the people of Guyana that you're strengthening each institution because you want to be able to deliver more on your promises. And this feeds into your manifesto, because that is the textbook that you're using to show that this is what we've promised, this is how much we were able to deliver, but because we need to add more value, we need to add more substance to what we've been doing. So you need to really give the nation a progress report. And we've not really gotten a progress report. The 4.1% growth is not credible. It's baseless. So we can't use that in any discussion. But the buck stops with the Commander-in-Chief. He has to give us a progress report. He needs to tell us exactly where we're at, benchmarking it against the manifesto. If you can't do that, then we're at loss to figure out.
I think they're busy now trying to play catch up.
Right, because what are the TORs for all of these positions? What gaps are they filling? We don't know that. So clearly, we will have to make our own assumptions. Because at the end of the day, the people of the nation would have to let the government know if we're getting value for our votes. And clearly, if you look at what happened at the last local government elections and everything that ensued following that, with the no confidence motion being passed, now that's in the process in terms of judiciary. Clearly, the people of Guyana has been screaming at the government, basically to say we are not getting value for our time and our efforts. And if the people are not getting value, then you, as a government, would need to take corrective measures. And they're not doing that. They're doing things to ensure that they can continue to enrich themselves and to take care of their own, when you should be taking care of the people of this nation.
Well, we saw that from day one.
That's an injustice. That is sad. It's very sad that we're in this position because we've come a long way under the 23 years rule of the People's Progressive Party, Civic. And there's no reason why we should be still discussing mechanics, nuts and bolts issue. We should be we should be thinking and moving towards getting towards prosperity. And we can't even have a talk on prosperity because the economy is a dead stop. Nothing is happening. There's no movement in the business environment, and the entire economy is depressed. The citizens are depressed, while in the meantime, members of government are enjoying the good life.
The good
so
life,
the good
it's
life
just for them.
The good life was not a promise to the people of this nation. The good life was a promise to the persons who are sympathetic or involved with the government, and that is a sad reality.
Good evening. Hello, good evening. I think we didn't get that one there. I wanted to take a few calls quickly before we move on to some other issues. Because we've been talking about the issue of corruption, cronyism, nepotism in this government. We've been talking about the blatant cases of conflict of interest and so forth. But I'm going to take a call before we actually move to the next issue we want to address. Good evening.
Good night to Mr. Layne and Mr. Todd.
Good evening, sir.
Your program is very interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I would like to know who pays the expenses for the president to go to Cuba for medical treatment.
Well, the state is obligated, and the state is obligated to pay the medical expenses for the president and all of us. I personally would want the president and any other president of this country.
But it is regularity, it is one time or two times a year or so, it's a different matter.
I don't think so. I don't think there is any stipulation as it relates to what is being paid. And as Guyanese, I mean, sometimes we have to, we have to have a heart. And we all would want to wish the president a speedy recovery as fast as possible, that he can get back to work and that we can actually see him doing some work to move Guyana forward.
Now the Attorney General has a barrage of legal advisors.
Yeah.
Who pays those people?
Well,
And when
now
of the Attorney General?
now you're raising a serious issue, and that is a question that we've been asking over and over. Who is paying for all these legal advisors and all these people that the Attorney General is running around the place hiring to defend? And I keep arguing this. I may be wrong, but my argument has always been, all right, thanks for coming through, sir. I'll respond. All right?
What?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, dear. I thought he was finished, and I
probably
disconnected
had
the
another
call.
comment.
But I've been maintaining. I think that the issue of the no confidence motion is not an issue about the government of the day, and the state should not be paying for that. I'm saying this is a political party trying to hold on to power. Like the PPP, a political party is saying that you failed. The AP and UAFC is a political coalition, and they're trying to hold on to power. My personal view is that the state should not be paying for their representation at the CCJ, at the appeals court, or anywhere else. I think the political parties involved in the coalition should be paying for that. But we're paying. So if they lose the case, which we are confident they will lose, it means the state bore the burden of probably hundreds of millions of dollars to pay for an issue that is purely a political one.
It's quite interesting that you raised that point, Ed. I think it's an abuse of state resources, because at the end of the day, once you're in government, you have to ensure that you're getting value for taxpayers' dollars, and you cannot exploit taxpayers for your own benefit as a political party in government, and that is not something that we should encourage. Clearly, the opposition would not do something like that. To drag a process through the court system, knowing fully well that it's not prudent and it's not necessary, just because you have the power to do it, and that is why you have to be very careful when you're electing a government to go beyond just your love for a party and try to break it down in finer parts to understand who you're actually electing, because those persons should be able to carry out your wishes, not their wishes. What we're having now is a government with representatives who should be representing the people carrying out their own wishes, and that is not democratic, It's exploitation, and it's something that we need to bring to an end. And we will bring that to an end when we go to the polls coming soon.
Good evening. Hello, good evening, sir. Hello? I think we lost our one there. So I want to move you to the next issue. And this has been quite a ticklish one, quite an interesting one, one that has been in the news for quite some time. What is happening with the issue of Minister of Public Telecommunications? But before I do that, I just want to take another call because I'm trying to fit the calls in as we go along before the time get away from us. Good evening.
Hey, good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
I kind of enjoy your program, and I think you all did a good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I something for the minister, them Noel Golder.
Mm-hmm.
I see one time Minister Jordan, he went to Buxton and promised the farmers they could trench and let them farm and all these things. But I think he is the Minister of Finance.
Yes, he is.
And I was pretty much surprised when I see him come to the field and, you know, at Buxton back and doing the, I would call it the minister work. But with the little power that you all have, you know, I mean, I'm really glad if the canals them in the Myconi area clean, because the only one that's clean is the one that MMA is looking after.
Okay.
And the work MMA used to do it, the DNI work there, but the DNI simply cannot manage the system. Is the money paid over because they have a lot of employment, you know, at the DNI office, but no proper work in doing. So I got the MMA can control back the scheme and get the work do it. I don't know how they do it and how they used to do it, but I mean, they was doing a good job before, and with the little power that you guys have, if you can just look into the sector for me, yeah, I would have, me and my family would have really appreciated it.
All right. Thanks for coming through, brother. All right. I made a note of the concern raised there. I probably tried to see if I can talk to somebody to find out why the canals in the Myconi area have not been cleaned. But that is the problem. And the gentleman raised the issue. The Minister of Agriculture does absolutely nothing. So, and that is where the problem is. So I said I wanted to move to the next issue, but because of that caller, you know, I had to spend some time there. So, Minister of Public Telecommunications, Catherine Hughes, has been in the news for some time. And there are some really probing issues here that I think a lot of questions, there are more questions than answers with regards to a company that she owns. The minister, however, claimed that she would have ceded any responsibility or involvement in the company on a day-to-day basis, but that is beyond the point. Initially, when the issue came up about contracts being awarded to a company by the name of Video Mega Production, which is owned by Minister Catherine Hughes, we have heard that the minister is no longer involved in the operations of the company. And I spoke to the man who she said is now responsible for the company, the day-to-day operation, Russell Lancaster, who said to me, I asked him pointedly, have you been receiving contracts from the government since 2015? He said, we received one contract, and that is the contract from the Department of Energy for $832,000, I think it was. And the other contract, and these were his exact words, the only other contract that we received was from PAHO for the Tobacco Control Bill Public Relations Campaign. By the way, these international agencies don't really award contracts for government programs directly. Usually it goes through the government system. They would fund it, but the government system is what deals with it. However, the PPP, and I want to go through this statement quickly for you. This was on the 25th of April, just 2 days ago. The PPP released a statement which says the People's Progressive Party has received information that, contrary to the claims made by Minister Cathy Hughes, several contracts were awarded by her own ministry to her company, Video Mega Production. So this is the Minister of Public Telecommunications, and we're saying based on a list of contracts that we received, where contracts were awarded to her company from her ministry, right? And there are a number of questions. So on June 4th, 2018, the minister's company received a contract for advertisement of vacancies for $939,000 from the Ministry of Public Telecommunications. So the Minister of Public Telecommunications company received a contract close to $1 million from the ministry that she is running. Then on the 25th of June, another contract for Facebook page, I want to presume for managing the Facebook page, for $119,000. So we're already over $1 million there. Then on the 21st of September, a contract for $2,291,000 for the CTU/ITC Roadshow 2018. So 3 contracts, over $3 million, went to the company owned by the minister from the ministry that she's responsible for. It didn't end there. There's another 5 contracts from the Ministry of Public Infrastructure on the 19th of September, $256,000 for television advertisements. Then on the 28th of September from the Ministry of Business, video for the Caribbean Tourism Diaspora Forum for $198,000. Then from the Ministry of Education on the 12th of June, video production, that is all that is listed there. $1.4 million for video production. Then from the Ministry of Public Health on July 27, 2018, advertisements for $3.5 million. So in a space of about 4 months, this company that is owned, formed, established by the minister some years ago, which the minister is still the custodian of, whether or not she's involved into the day-to-day operation, she is still the custodian of that company, received $10.3 million in contracts. And I want to say this to you, that's not the end of it. That's not the end of it. This is just the tip of the iceberg as we talk, as we speak here.
Listening to the list, one would want to ask the question if it's still a privately owned company, or if it's now a state-owned company, because it boggles the mind to understand, how this can actually happen. Clearly, the minister was involved in the private sector before becoming a public servant, and she should be aware, or she must be aware of the implications of moving from the private sector into government. Because clearly, when she was in opposition, her company would have been bidding for contracts. So when you get into office, you have to ensure that you run a very lean portfolio, so that transparency could emerge as fundamental in your operation. So there's a lot of questions to be answered, and the minister will have to come forward and clear up these arguments. If she cannot justify to the people of Guyana that they have been following procedures and protocols and not breaking the law, then she should resign, or the president should step in and ask her to go back to the private sector, because you don't have to be in the public sector if you have a very rich and vibrant private sector company. Why would you want both share? Leave public sector to public servants and stay in the private sector, but you can't want it both ways.
But the question I want to ask here, the minister has been maintaining, I have absolutely no involvement in the day-to-day operations of the company. Fair enough.
That is beside the point.
The question here is,
that doesn't clarify
you're the owner
the
of this company. What the minister needs to do is the minister needs to make public information that will show that she no longer benefits financially from this company. This is the fundamental issue. The fundamental issue is not really whether the minister is involved into the day-to-day operation, whether the minister is aware of this company getting contracts. The bottom line is, in 4 months, $10.3 million in contracts went to this company formed by the minister, which she is still the owner of. She may not be involved in the day-to-day operation. Then who is benefiting from the profit?
The company, which she owns.
Who is benefiting from the profit?
Well, she's obviously benefiting from it.
Exactly my point.
She hasn't divorced
And
herself
that is
from
where
company.
the issue of conflict of interest comes in. Now, I would say this, and I know, a lot of people are afraid to talk about this issue because the minister threatened some people with lawsuits and so on. They're afraid to do it.
Yeah,
It becomes a taboo
but the
issue
minister
because...
is now a public servant, and when you're a public servant, there are certain responsibilities that you have to fulfill, and that is service to the people. And if the people or the citizens are not clear on what is going on, you have to be forthright and clear up any issues that we have, because you are not elected to represent yourself. You're elected to represent the people of this country. So you have to ensure that you're above board when you're a politician, because you're accountable to the people of Guyana.
Good evening. I think we lost our one there, yes. So I keep making this point. The fundamental issue is the minister is benefiting at the end of the day because she is the owner of the company. Let me take this call. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Layne.
Hi, good evening, sir.
Mr. Todd. Okay, I am listening. I mean, for the shortest today, a while listening and looking at the program.
Yeah.
And I would like to make an observation with respect to Mr. Todd's statement in terms of what he said about conflict of interest. Now, when the last administration, when they were in power, we had people who were in the government and they had business. So I don't see a problem in that.
Who are these people, by the way?
Pardon me?
Who are these people you're speaking of?
Well, for instance, Mr. Robert Prasad, he's the owner for the station, right? He's the proprietor, so to speak. Right, so I don't see a problem.
So if I'm to tell you that you're misinformed with that statement.
Well, apart from that, you had a minister.
That's a shareholder company. Do you know that company which you refer to is a shareholder company?
Well, maybe no, but before.
It has always been a shareholder company.
I am not aware of this.
I am aware, I'm telling you. It has always been a shareholder company.
So what is the point of attacking Ms. Cathywood in such a manner that, okay, well, she's not the only person that, whether in this administration or the previous administration had business, you know what I mean, and still being a minister or a member of the government, you know what I mean? Let us be fair in our assessment, our judgment, or evaluation. Let us don't attack like, you know what I mean?
All right,
we'll
respond to you. Thanks for coming through, brother.
Welcome, sir.
All right, good. So, you want to go first or you want me to go first?
Let me see if I can respond.
You go first.
The issue here with the caller is not a blame game. We're dealing with the government of the day that made certain promises, that told the people of Guyana that they're the better party to lead this nation. So clearly, if you're preparing to run a country and to let the people know that you are going to do things differently for the benefit of all, there is no reason for us to be saying it happened before. That is not how a country progresses. A country progresses when people come, they do things differently, and they add value. So what the caller needs to understand is that we're dealing with how much value you're adding, because you can always nitpick, but collectively, it's the government adding value. And to figure that out, we have to go through each and every ministry and look at what is going on. And if we have a situation where the minister's outfit has been receiving contracts and it is not consistent with proper procedures and practice, then it has to be flagged. Because if we as a citizen or citizens of this country sit back and say, well, it happened before, so let's continue, the country will not heal, will not move forward. So on either side, we have to hold whichever government is in power accountable. And we have to understand that that is a position we have to take as an opposition, as civil society, and as ordinary citizens.
I want to add to what you said there to this caller before we wrap things up. I think we just have probably a minute or two more. Is the fact that, and this is the problem that we have, every time an issue comes up with this government, blatant issue, cases of of corruption, nepotism, cronyism, poor judgment, a lot of folks are running back to, oh, the PPP did. But most of the times, when they make those claims, they can hardly actually substantiate them.
Yeah.
So, his claim is that there were other people. You can simply say other people.
Yeah.
Naming those people is a different story. That is why I had to highlight to him that his example was misplaced.
Yes.
Right? The point is, are we in a situation where, as Guyanese, we are trying to justify wrong? Are we trying to justify wrongs? That is what we're doing? By the way, this government said, oh, we're bringing change. We're going to change. All that you accused the PPP of, we're going to do it differently. What different? What are they doing differently?
That is exactly why we're here.
Well, they're doing it worse. The Guyanese are worse off. That's the
We're looking at
point.
the collective whole. We're looking at what the progress we've made under the PPPC, and we're looking at continuation. The economy is in a state of paralysis. So we cannot sit back and say, well, it's okay, it's fine. It's not fine, because his life and the life of his future generation would be tarnished. So we have to be very bold, objective, and open-minded about treating with any government of the day. So it is not cool for us to be saying, well, it happened before, because that's a very lazy approach to governance, and that should not happen. That is not how we should address issues.
All right, so we are almost out of time. Let me just wrap things up here. But before I go, I just want to say, I want to take this opportunity to call on the Minister of Public Telecommunications to do a few things. One, you're claiming that you have no involvement in the company. We in the PPP, and all of us, I think, Guyanese, would like to see the Minister release the relevant document to support her claim that she no longer involves in the company, where she's no longer signing checks, she's no longer drawing down from the benefits of the company in terms of the profit, and so forth. Also, let the minister declare make public her declarations to the Integrity Commission. Let us see what she submitted and whether or not she's benefiting. The fact that she's responsible for the ministry, she may not say something to somebody, but the fact that she's a senior minister in the government, any department that goes to award a contract and see the minister's company turned up there, will feel somehow obligated to say that I have to hand this contract to this company. That's the reality, so there is nothing you can do about it. All right? So the minister need to clarify these things publicly.
And those individuals want to protect their jobs as well.
Exactly. No amount of lawsuits going to help you, the Honorable Minister, to get out of this. You need to face the public, and you need to clarify this. We're going to be back here with you next week. We're out of time. Of course, we're going to continue these discussions, and we're going to continue to hold this government accountable. This government has failed all Guyanese, and we're going to continue to hold their feet over the fire. I should say that is figuratively. Before you hear I'm inciting violence. I'm in no way inciting violence. I'm saying we're going to figuratively hold their feet over the fire so that they can be accountable to the people of this country. Until next week, on behalf of my good friend and comrade here, Hugh Todd, we want to say thank you very much for being part of the program. We're going to be back with you next week. Have a good rest of the evening.
Good night and goodbye.